Okay, so hosting the Olympics looks like the most expensive party a city could ever throw. Except the bill keeps arriving after every guest has gone home. You picture the opening ceremony, the flags over the streets, the packed trains, the athletes, the sponsors, and one city becoming the center of the world. Hotels fill. Construction projects that had drifted for years suddenly finish. Politicians point to new stations, new housing, new public spaces, and promise that the games will pay the city back long after the medals are awarded. Then the flame goes out. The athletes leave. The television crews pack their cameras. The temporary signs come down. The city stays exactly where it is. Paris tried to make that moment less dangerous than it had been for earlier hosts. It promised to reuse almost everything, keep most Olympic capacity temporary, and build only a small number of permanent projects. During the games, that plan looked remarkably convincing. The venues were full. The transport system held. More than 12 million Olympic and Paralympic tickets were sold. The temporary organization running the event ended with money left over. So did Paris finally solve the economics of hosting? Maybe, but first, you have to understand what a host city actually receives. Because a city does not buy the Olympics. It does not own the Olympic rings, the global television rights, or the worldwide sponsorship system. The International Olympic Committee controls the brand and awards one city the right to stage one edition under a host agreement. That right is temporary. The obligations are not. The host creates a local organizing committee. That committee sells domestic sponsorships, tickets, hospitality, licensed products, and other event revenue. It receives support connected to the International Olympic Committee's global broadcast and sponsorship programs. It hires staff, coordinates volunteers, books venues, moves athletes, runs ceremonies, and makes sure thousands of events and movements happen when the schedule says they will happen. For a few years, it becomes one of the most complicated event companies on Earth. But the organizing committee is designed to disappear. The rail operator is still there afterward, so is the police force, so is the local government responsible for the neighborhood around a venue, so is the agency that owns a station and the authority that maintains a road. They all help stage the same Olympics. They do not all live on the same account. That distinction matters most when the deadline starts closing in. A normal development can open late. A normal company can postpone a launch. An Olympic host cannot quietly announce that the opening ceremony has been moved to next spring. The broadcasters have sold the schedule. The athletes have trained for the date. Visitors have booked rooms. Security plans are active. Trains, roads, venues, power systems, ceremonies, and thousands of workers all have to be ready at once. Picture the final year before the games. A stadium may already exist. That does not mean the Olympic Stadium exists. Around the building, crews add temporary seats, television compounds, secure entrances, sponsor areas, backup power, medical rooms, credential checkpoints, fencing, signs, storage, data systems, buses, barriers, and control rooms. Then they do it again at the next venue, and the next one. An ordinary arena might know how to handle a concert or a league final. The Olympics add athletes, international federations, global broadcasters, security zones, hospitality operations, volunteer systems, and crowds moving according to a schedule built across an entire city. The building is only the shell. The host has to wrap a temporary operating city around it. Meanwhile, normal life keeps moving underneath. Commuters still need trains. Hospitals still need access. Businesses still need deliveries. Residents still need streets that work. The host does not get to close the city, build the Olympic version in peace, and reopen it when everything is ready. That is what makes the fixed date so expensive. The closer the opening ceremony gets, the more valuable certainty becomes. If a supplier falls behind, the host still needs the equipment. If a security requirement changes, the plan expands. If a station is not ready, crews work faster. If a venue needs more power than expected, someone finds it. The city is not only buying labor and materials. It is buying the removal of every failure that could become the only image the world remembers. And some of the most expensive Olympic work is designed to produce no image at all, no security incident, no transport collapse, no unfinished venue behind the television presenter. Success often looks like nothing happened. Paris built its strategy around reducing the number of permanent things that could go wrong later. Approximately 95% of its competition venues were existing or temporary. Established stadiums, arenas, and public spaces were adapted for a few weeks, then expected to return to ordinary use. Temporary structures could be taken apart. Permanent construction was concentrated in a much smaller group of projects, including the Olympic Village and the Aquatics Center. That sounds like an architecture decision. It is really a financial decision made in concrete steel, fencing, and removable seats. The Aquatic Center gives you the clearest physical clue. During the Olympics, it needed roughly 6,000 seats. After the Games, the permanent configuration was designed for approximately 2,500. More than half the seats were never supposed to stay. Keep that detail in mind. At this stage, the host is still racing toward the event, and the only customer anyone can see is the Olympic customer. Every planning chart is built around packed venues, full transport systems, television compounds, athletes, officials, and spectators arriving from around the world. The numbers look enormous because Olympic demand is enormous. The harder question has not arrived yet. First, Paris has to open. Before sunrise on an Olympic day, transport workers are already moving through stations. Security teams are at checkpoints before spectators arrive. Volunteers put on uniforms and take their positions. Broadcast crews test the pictures that will be sent around the world. Athletes leave the village on controlled routes. Kitchens prepare meals. Drivers check schedules. Venue teams inspect doors, power, screens, timing systems, and every piece of equipment that cannot fail once the crowd enters. Then the city fills. A ticket is scanned. A sponsor's name appears beside the venue. Hospitality guests enter a separate area. Television cameras turn the competition into a product for an audience far larger than the people in the building. Food is sold. Merchandise is sold. Trains arrive. Crowds move. The temporary system becomes fully alive. This is the part that looks like a business. Money comes in from tickets, domestic sponsorships, hospitality, licensing, merchandise, and support connected to the International Olympic Committee's global programs. The global television audience creates enormous value, but the host does not simply own that audience. The International Olympic Committee controls the worldwide broadcast and top-level sponsorship system. The local organizer receives support from that system, then has to build its own domestic commercial machine around it. That means the city supplies the streets, stations, venues, public services, and physical setting for a global product, without controlling every valuable transaction attached to it. The arrangement can still work. It just matters which institution receives which payment and which institution receives which bill. Paris's organizing committee eventually reported approximately €4,494,000,000 in revenue against about €4,419,000,000 in spending. That revenue included roughly €224 million in public subsidies. The final result was a surplus of approximately €76 million, and the public guarantee behind the committee did not have to cover a deficit. That is not accounting decoration. The temporary event business worked. The tickets sold. The sponsors paid. The venues operated. The city delivered the images it had promised. For the people who had spent years preparing the games, the closing ceremony could reasonably feel like vindication, and the visible economy seemed to agree. During the Olympic period, the Paris region recorded roughly 7,100,000 tourist stays, about 11% above the comparable period 1 year earlier. Near the venues, the effect was easy to see. Hotels had guests, Olympic corridors had crowds, restaurants in the right places had customers, trains were full, television audiences were enormous. Take the view from inside the temporary city. A volunteer sees spectators moving where the signs tell them to move. A transport worker sees platforms clearing under pressure. A venue manager sees every seat occupied. A sponsor sees its name in front of a global audience. An official sees a project that opened on time despite years of warnings that something would fail. Every visible signal points in the same direction. The event worked. For one night, the entire promise appeared to have worked with it. The flame went out. The athletes left. The organizing committee began closing contracts and preparing to disappear. Then the audit arrived. The French Cour des Comptes did not look only at the temporary organization that sold the tickets. It looked at the public institutions that had provided security, organized transport, financed infrastructure, changed public spaces, and carried responsibilities the event company could not carry by itself. Public spending related to organization came to approximately €3,020,000,000. Public infrastructure spending came to approximately €3,630,000,000. Together those categories represented roughly €6,650,000,000 in gross public spending connected to the Games. Now the story changes. The organizing surplus is real. The public spending is real. They do not cancel each other because they belong to different institutions and measure different things. The event can finish successfully before the city's investment has even been tested. Start with security. Paris's public security operation was estimated at approximately €1,700,000,000. The organizing committee separately spent nearly €300 million on its own security responsibilities. Think about what that money was buying: officers in stations, controlled streets, protected sites, correctional systems, command centers, emergency plans, information systems, equipment, thousands of people ready for events everyone hoped would never happen. Some of that cost ended with the games, some remained in equipment, systems, training, and capability. Those are not the same economic outcome. Transport carried a similar split. Olympic-related transport organization cost approximately €1,350 million, with most of it borne by public actors. The operation worked, and the audit found that the Games accelerated useful infrastructure without leaving oversized Olympic-only transport systems behind. That sounds like the model working exactly as promised. Then you look closer. The Games helped solve the transport problem created by the Games and pushed selected improvements forward. But the wider Paris Metro still did not become fully accessible. The deadline moved some priorities faster than others. The public total cannot simply be called a loss. Some of it paid for temporary services. Some of it bought lasting assets. Some did both. It cannot simply be called investment, either. A city can complete a useful-looking project and still choose the wrong project. Construction workers can be paid, suppliers can sell materials, and a new facility can open on time while the same land, labor, and borrowing capacity might have produced something more valuable elsewhere. The comparison is not the Olympics against doing nothing. It is the Olympics against the best other use of the same city. Even the phrase over budget depends on where you begin counting. One Oxford study calculated a real Paris overrun of approximately 115% under its methodology. The French public audit, using a different scope and baseline, found that major infrastructure delivery generally remained in line with the forecasts it was measuring. Those conclusions sound incompatible. They are not necessarily measuring the same promise. One comparison can begin with the early bid stage number. Another can begin with a later approved program after the scope is clearer. One can include a broad range of Olympic-related costs. Another can examine a defined infrastructure portfolio. Change the starting line and the same finish can look very different. This is why an Olympic budget is never just a number. It is a boundary drawn around certain institutions, dates, and projects. The audit also identified approximately €294 million in public revenue from taxation and commercial activity. That money matters, but it still cannot be subtracted from the gross public total to produce one clean taxpayer loss. The available public revenue figure was not exhaustive. Tax expenditures and exemptions could not all be measured, and lasting public assets do not fit into a one-year profit calculation. The closer you look, the less honest a single headline number becomes. Tourism creates the same problem in a more visible form. During the Games, visitors clearly arrived. But across the wider tourism season, overnight stays and collective accommodation in the region were approximately 6% lower than 1 year earlier. Some museums, restaurants, retailers, taxi drivers, and businesses away from Olympic zones reported weaker activity. The city could be crowded and still lose ordinary customers. A family may avoid the city because it expects restrictions or high prices. A conference may move. A spectator may spend an entire day inside an Olympic zone and never reach the museum or restaurant that expected a windfall. The Olympic visitor is easy to photograph. The visitor who never came is invisible. Weather, industrial action, political uncertainty, access controls, and ordinary travel patterns also affected the season. So those figures do not prove the Games damaged tourism. They reveal something more useful. A visitor surge during the event is not automatically additional demand for the city as a whole. The national growth figures carry the same timing problem. The Banque de France estimated that the Games added roughly 1/4 of a percentage point to French economic growth in the third quarter of 2024. That activity was real. The broadcasts happened. The spectators entered. The services were delivered. But some ticket sales had taken place over several years and were recognized when the Games were delivered. A large amount of activity appeared in 1 quarter, followed by a partial accounting reversal later. A spike can describe the moment accurately without describing the future. One study estimated that the Games could generate between roughly €6,700 million and €11,100 million in economic impact across construction, event activity, tourism, and future legacy effects. That is not a forecast of government profit. Economic impact follows money moving through the economy. A contractor gets paid. Workers receive wages. A hotel sells rooms. A supplier delivers equipment. The activity can be real, useful, and widely distributed. The remaining question is what the city bought. And now the missing seats at the Aquatic Center finally make sense. During the Olympics, the building needed roughly 6,000 of them. The cameras needed a major competition venue. The event needed spectators. The Olympic customer existed because the Games created that customer. Afterward, the building was designed for approximately 2,500 seats and community use. The extra capacity came out because the next customer was completely different. Picture a parent bringing a child to the pool on an ordinary morning after the Games. No international broadcast, no sponsor pavilion, no controlled athlete route, no crowd arriving from another country, just a local facility opening its doors and trying to justify its place in the city one ordinary visit at a time. That parent is part of the real legacy market. So is the resident moving into converted housing, the commuter using an improved route, the sports club booking the facility, the public employee maintaining the systems after the organizing committee has gone. None of them needs an Olympic-sized city. That is the structural risk hidden inside hosting. The Games require exceptional capacity for a few weeks, more seats, security, transport, accommodation, staff, media space, and control over public places. The dangerous decision is making that exceptional demand permanent. A temporary grandstand can leave. A permanent concourse sends a bill every year. A village can become housing, but only if people actually live there. A transport improvement creates value only if ordinary passengers use it. A sports facility can serve the public without earning a commercial profit, but it still needs enough social use to justify construction, staffing, energy, maintenance, and the other projects the city gave up to build it. Paris's 95% reuse strategy reduced how often the city had to make that bet. Existing venues already had users. Temporary structures could disappear. Where permanent projects were built, conversion was supposed to connect Olympic use to ordinary life. That does not prove the legacy has succeeded. It explains what success would have to look like. This is also where the fixed opening date changes meaning. Before the Games, the deadline looked like a cost. It forced agencies, contractors, utilities, police, transport operators, and venue teams to finish together. It made delay expensive and uncertainty dangerous. After the Games, the same deadline can look like the main thing the city purchased. Cities can announce projects for years. One agency waits for another. Permits move slowly. Elections change priorities. Timelines stretch because no single day forces the whole system to finish. The Olympics create that day. In the strongest version of hosting, a city is not inventing projects for the Games. It is using the Games to force completion of projects it already needs. That can create real value. It can also protect a bad decision. A fixed date makes cancellation harder. Rushing costs more. Guarantees move risk toward the public. A project that would struggle under an ordinary cost-benefit test may survive because the city has already promised the world it will be ready. The deadline is valuable only when the underlying city plan was valuable first. Los Angeles in 1984 shows what the favorable version can look like. Its organizing committee produced a reported surplus of approximately $233 million. It relied heavily on existing venues, strong broadcast demand, exclusive sponsorships, and a huge commercial market. It did not have to create an entirely new permanent city for the event. That result was real and unusual. Most bidders do not begin with the same venue base, media market, sponsorship power, climate, and urban scale. Los Angeles did not prove every city can profit from hosting. It showed why the temporary event becomes much safer when it sits on top of assets and demand that already exist. There is one part of the return no audit can settle completely. Families remember the events. Volunteers participate in a global occasion. Athletes inspire people to take up sport. Residents may value a shared public experience that an ordinary infrastructure project cannot create. Those benefits are real to many people. They are not a blank check. A city may decide that the experience is worth paying for. The honest version says that clearly instead of pretending every ticket, visitor, and television camera will return the public cost as profit. So does hosting the Olympics work economically? It can, but only when the host understands that the event and the city are not the same customer. The event needs extraordinary capacity for a few weeks. The city needs useful capacity for decades. The safest host already has most of what the event needs, makes the rest temporary, and builds permanently only where ordinary people were waiting before the bid. Housing needs residents. Transport needs commuters. Sports facilities need clubs, schools, families, and public programs. The organizing budget needs realistic revenue. Security and guarantees need to be counted honestly. Tourism forecasts need to include the visitors who may stay away. And before construction begins, the host has to ask one question that cuts through almost every Olympic promise. Would we still want this project if the Games never came? If the answer is yes, the Olympics may accelerate something valuable. If the answer is no, the city may be building for a customer that disappears at the closing ceremony. Paris delivered the event, reused most of its venues, kept much of its excess capacity, temporary, and closed the organizing committee with a surplus. Those are real achievements. France also committed billions in public money, and the long-term result is still being written by the people using what remains. At the closing ceremony, the flame goes out. On television, that looks like the end. For the parent walking into the smaller community pool, the resident entering converted housing, and the commuter taking the same route years later, it is the beginning of the only test that matters. Hosting the Olympics is not really the purchase of a few weeks of global attention. It is the decision to attach an immovable global deadline to part of a city and accept everything that deadline forces into existence. The medals justify the event. Only ordinary life can justify what remains.